Hello, welcome to Ekklesia Contemporary Ballet, Dance and Dialogue. Thank you for joining us. Before we get started, we just wanted to share with you a little bit about who we are and what we do. We are a professional faith-based dance company that works in partnership with the Church of the Holy Trinity in Middletown, Connecticut. We are excited to be in such a central location, partnering with a church who shares the same mission and vision. We are both working to lift up social justice issues that plague our society, finding ways that we can overcome that which divides us with meaningful discussions around art and faith. The company meets 4 times a week in the spacious studios located in the church for discussions, class, and rehearsals. We are passionate about what we do, and we are thankful for all who have partnered with us to keep us going through the pandemic. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ekklesia Contemporary Ballet, Dance and Dialogue for the month of January. Our discussion tonight is on mental health. My name is Alyssa Schroth, and I use the pronouns she and her, and I am the artistic director and founder of Ekklesia, and I will also be your host this evening. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I think it's safe to say that due to COVID, we are all struggling in some way or another with mental health. And I'm looking forward to sharing with you some of the rich resources that we have in our area to hopefully give you some comfort during this time. Before we begin, it is my pleasure to introduce you to our panelist speakers that will be joining us. We have with us Morley Van Yperen, who goes by she and her pronouns, and she is our theologian in residence. Also with us is Reverend Larissa Forsyth. They use she and her, and she is the associate minister at the Congregational Church in South Glastonbury, Connecticut. We also have with us Kelvin Young, RSS. They use he and him, and they are the community health worker and he's also a certified sound healer at Intercommunity Healthcare Incorporated, which is located in Hartford, Connecticut. Is that right? Yes. Not only here to speak with us, but he also has a special treat for us that he will explain later. And also here to discuss the work with you are the dancers. First, I'm going to introduce you to our assistant director, Rochelle Stevenson. They go by she and her. And we also have company artist, Sasha Biagirelli. They go by she and her. And Emily Edwards, who also goes by she and her. And India Olchevsky, who is on her way to Washington, D.C. right now, which is her hometown. They go by she and her. So the work, and actually now I've introduced you to everyone, so I'm going to jump into the work. And the work you're about to see is called Dark Night. It is a piece about trauma and the effects of trauma on the body and spirit. A poem by St. John of the Cross of the same name was part of the research material, which is sung throughout the piece. Also a part of the research were interviews from those who have suffered from trauma and PTSD. Among their stories, it was something that was kind of new to me, that when I was looking into all of this, was that there's just so many different situations that can cause trauma. Of course, we're familiar with war and veterans of the war, but we had interviews of people who were raped, who've lost a child, physical abuse, and really, trauma is just something that we all can experience trauma in many different ways. So we just want to invite you to explore that with us and know that there's no judgment here and it's a safe space. The work that you're about to see is meant to take you on a journey into the brokenness of trauma and PTSD and follow a path of healing. So now we're going to see Dark Night for the first viewing. Welcome back, everyone. To start our dialogue, just get our dialogue started, we'd just like to hear what some first impressions you might have, if there's a movement that stuck out to you, or if you have any thoughts or anything to add, any questions for our dancers or for myself in the creation of the project. I'll be checking the chat for comments and for questions. While we're waiting for some questions to come in, Ricky, who is the lead dancer in this piece, maybe you could give some reflections on what it was like resetting this work, because we did have to reset it for the COVID restrictions. We used to have a lot of partnering, a lot of touching contact, which is when the chair became a part of the piece as well. So maybe you could speak a little bit to that process.
Yeah, I think this year has been unique for lots of reasons. And one of the things that changed this year was I stepped into a different role. The main character was played by someone else originally, and getting to learn this piece from a new perspective, as well as all the other changes that came about with including a chair and changing most of the choreography so that we weren't physically connecting, and we had a little more space in between us, which I think was a different experience all around. But what it also allowed us to do, or allowed me to do from this place, is to connect with the piece and put a different backstory behind it. And it surprised me how that backstory changes every single time dancing the work. And honestly, even rewatching it now, I feel like it has a different perspective or different story, different meaning than it did the first time, or than I even remember it. But I think a few things that were different, or that I can talk about now specifically in resetting the work, is a little bit more collaboration. I think all around when we work with Ekklesia as an artistic director, there's a little bit of collaboration back and forth between dancers and choreographer, but especially with figuring out, okay, how can we tell this story, or how can we tell this element of a new story, and how do we do that in a way that is within our limitations because of COVID, and also takes on a different purpose or different heart. So I think at some point we'll probably talk a little bit more about maybe what that chair means to our audience, because I think it has so many different interpretations. But even in starting that conversation, and just, okay, originally it was an easy way to do partnering without physically touching each other. It was a way we could really create that together. But I think it also allowed us to, okay, visualize more so, now that there is this prop here, what can it mean to me personally? What can it mean to our audience? And how can that take shape? And how can that change? So it's an interesting year, but I think it's been a really great experience resetting this work for our dancers here. Every time we bring someone new in, I think it changes it in its own way. And then specifically with everything else we've had to adjust with it, it's really taken on its own character in that sense.
Thank you. Wonderful. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first panelist speaker, which Reverend Larissa Forsyth. And she is the Associate Minister from the South Church of the Congregational Church in South Glastonbury here in Connecticut. And I invited her here to talk to us a little bit about what her church is doing in response to mental health, and how they provide resources for the community, how they empathize with people that are suffering in this way, and how they can give resources and to their church, and also in the community around them.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. As Alyssa said, I'm Reverend Larissa Forsyth. I've been with the Congregational Church in South Glastonbury for 4 years now. We are an open and affirming church for LGBTQ plus since 1991. And part of our mission is to embody the gospel through radical hospitality. And so I had been at the church for a little over a year in 2018 in the summer, and we had lost too many people to suicide that summer. And gathered a small group of us together to try to understand what we might do. We did a workshop around a book called Being a Life-Saving Church. And through that journey, we decided that we would like to become a WISE designated church. And WISE in the United Church of Christ, I should say, we're part of the United Church of Christ denomination. WISE in the United Church of Christ is a designation that says we are a church that is welcoming, inclusive, supportive, and engaged around mental health issues. And so we've been on that journey for a while. COVID has definitely put a little bit of a damper on that, but some of our first actions were so simple and ended up being so powerful. One of the very first things we did was put together just a sheet of paper with all kinds of resources in the community if you were having an emergency, 211, how you might text a crisis line to talk with someone. And we put those on the back of the restroom doors in every restroom in the church. And we got so much feedback on that. Just the simple act of saying, we care. And here are some ways that you can reach out. Also, welcomed folks to reach out to the staff. And we got a lot of excellent feedback from that. And I think in our journey, we've discovered that one of the most powerful things that churches can do is to break the silence. I think too often in churches, we're afraid to talk about difficult things. We imagine if we talk about mental illness, that somehow will exacerbate it or it will be uncomfortable. That's exactly what folks need, is to be open about our struggles. I have been pretty transparent about my own journey with chronic depression, and just see it as part of who I am and part of my faith journey and my walking in this life. I think that the church can also be more vulnerable about everything that we struggle with, not just about mental health issues. The more vulnerable we are, the more we invite people to show up with their whole selves. And we need to advocate for access to healthcare of all kinds, including mental health care. And we need to be part of education and awareness, have events. We've had a few mental health panels, things like that. And I think churches can all do a better job of breaking that silence and being part of the solution. And finally, I think it's not just about treating folks or providing that safe space, which is so important. I think it's also really important to lift up the fact that folks who struggle with mental health challenges, with mental illness, have so much to offer, have so many gifts, are a valuable, integral, necessary part of our community. So there's no, charitable act involved here. It's about embracing every single one of us. And mental health struggles can actually give a person a unique perspective that is a true gift to a community. So I think those are some of the things that we're doing and continue to work towards. And I would like to see more and more churches take those steps.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Reverend Larissa. I feel like sometimes, like in churches and as Christians, sometimes we just feel like we have to throw on the God is in control, or just the comment that's just sort of like, it's all fine, rather than really like sit with the uncertainty of or the struggle. And it sounds like your congregation is like really, really doing a great job of that, and like being able to be really just allow people to feel like they can be who they are. And that's wonderful to hear. And I am really encouraged to hear that that's the language and the work that you guys are doing around this issue.
Thank you. It's a work in progress. Just like being open and affirming, it's something that we work at every day. We keep continuing to deepen our commitment to one another. So thank you so much for having us and having me, Melissa.
Thank you. There's a great question that came through. Is WISE only for UCC? And what are some other parts of WISE besides panels and lists in the bathroom stalls? Thanks for sharing. Great work.
Yes. WISE is the United Church of Christ designation. Other denominations may have their own. And if you're in a denomination that's not UCC and you're interested in becoming a more welcoming, inclusive, supportive, and engaged community for folks who are struggling with mental health issues, which is really like 1 in 3 of us, and probably any of us at any given time, especially right now, you could probably contact your denomination or do something on your own. So we started our journey with having those signs and being open and working through education. We have not yet been designated WISE. As I said, COVID has kind of put a damper on our progress in that way. But I mean, I think there are so many resources out there for churches, for faith communities. Rachel Keefe is the author of the book, Becoming a Life-Saving Church, and she's done a lot of work around mental health in the church. So I would just encourage folks to get connected with their own denomination's resources and just see. We have also done mental health first aid training in our church, and we'll continue to do that once things get back to whatever normal looks like. So I think first and foremost, having a culture of vulnerability and openness is one of the most powerful things that we can do. Our goal is to be a church where it's just as easy to ask for prayers about a depression flare-up as it is about surgery or any other illness that you might be experiencing. We tend to hesitate to ask for things like that, and we want to be a community in which people feel just as comfortable praying for those things and asking for prayer.
Yes.
I hope that answered the question.
That's great. One more question for you. Does mental health give us insight into the life of God related to the image of God people bear?
Oh, wow. I think from a Christian perspective, Jesus on the cross informs us that God does in fact suffer alongside us and with us. So my theology does not affirm that God creates or causes mental illness, but I do think that God does walk with us and suffer with us. And as the dance seemed to, for me, what it meant was this, that God is accompanying us in the midst of this journey and helping us to notice and see the light that's around us. So I think in Jesus, we see that part of the image of God is in fact suffering and certainly accompanying us in our suffering.
Yeah, there was a great comment that came through that Jesus would like this vulnerability. He was a walking clinic of healing.
Amen.
Yeah, I love that.
Yes, amen.
Great. One more question. We're gonna for the dancers. We're gonna switch to this question. Let me have Sasha. Maybe you could answer this. Do you feel like the masks actually ended up contributing to the feel and message of the piece rather than becoming a hindrance?
That's a really good question, and I've never really thought about that before, but now that I'm thinking about it, they absolutely do. They add another dimension. When you are dancing a piece, when you're a dancer, you're trying to embody and take on whatever subject you're dancing about. And especially with Larissa talking about the fact that, mental health, sometimes there's like a lack of vulnerability, a lack of communication, a lack of awareness. I feel like almost this, like our hands are tied, our tongues are tied, we're unable to communicate what we need or what we want, or we're unable to connect. And so I feel like having those masks, it covers our mouths, which are, symbolic of communication and an easy way, a quote unquote normal way of connecting with another human being. And so the fact that you can't watch our expressions are not as recognizable, I feel like helps put the dancers more in the shoes of someone walking through a trauma that's making them feel isolated from those around them because they can't communicate. Their words are taken away. They feel stifled or quieted. And so they are maybe forced to try and connect through other ways, maybe in a literal sense, relating to the dance through our eyes or through our movements and motions. And those around them, in this case, the audience regarding the dance, have to interpret this communication not just through reading lips or listening to you speak. They have to like tap into some other way of connecting to another human being. So I think, yeah, the masks honestly could help us become more in the shoes of those of the subjects that we're exploring.
Well said, Sasha. Thank you. I never thought of that before either, but it definitely gives language to that experience. Now I'm going to introduce our next panelist speaker, Kelvin Young. And go ahead, Kelvin. Share with us about the work that you do, and also just give us some insight to this incredible resource that's in our community.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And just wow, that piece was just so amazing. Just the movement, the music, you know what I mean? The grace behind it, just the story that it told, because I was able to see that story, but also the untold story as well, too. And it was almost like a hero's journey, so to speak, when we got the struggle, when you find the strength and the hope. It was a very powerful, powerful piece. So thank you so much for this opportunity to watch it and to express myself about that piece with each and every one of you tonight. Again, my name is Kelvin Young, and I'm a community health worker for the Transitions Clinic at Intercommunity Healthcare in Hartford, Connecticut, where I work with formerly incarcerated people come out of prison, and I connect them to our primary care services, our physical health, our behavioral health services, our mental health services, and also our addiction, our recovery services as well. And I love to incorporate more of a holistic approach to it. I'm also a certified sound healer, and at the end, I will share a centering exercise for us just to center ourselves. But one of the most important things I want to share that I think is important for me to share is that I'm also a person that's in long-term recovery, which means I haven't used alcohol or any other drug to deal with my own mental emotional distress since March 6, 2009. And for me, after many years of battling with depression, anxiety, and drug addiction, I found freedom from alcohol, from marijuana, from cocaine, from heroin, and even prescription opiates like Oxycontin, Vicodins, and Percocets. But for me, I began my healing journey in a drug treatment program within prison. And it was within this prison program that I learned about the transformative powers of yoga, meditation, sound healing, even creative expressive arts like poetry and journaling. And I had a lot of misconceptions about yoga, about meditation. And to be quite frank, I didn't see a lot of people that looked like me, people of color, practicing these modalities. So I didn't think it was for me. But I know the things I was doing prior to going to prison, it wasn't working for me no more. So I had to try something new and different. And I'm so grateful that I did by utilizing those modalities. I had an opportunity to go within. And for me, healing truly begins from within. And I was able to find a sense of calmness and inner peace, even being in a very hostile and restrictive environment such as prison. But most importantly, I was able to understand the root causes of my experiences with addiction. And from that lived experience, I learned that it was the unhealed emotional pain that I experienced in my life, the unresolved trauma that I endured, and it went back to childhood. And the toxic chronic stress was at the root of my addiction. So I was reaching for something outside of myself to find a sense of relief from that distress. And for me, I found it in alcohol, marijuana, and cocaine, and heroin, and prescription opiates. And it worked for a while until it didn't work anymore. And I got caught up in that very vicious cycle of addiction. And that was a very powerful, powerful learning experience for me. And one of the many things I've learned is that language matters. When we talk about people that have different types of emotional distress and addictive states, language do matter. Instead of calling somebody schizophrenic or bipolar, you say there's a person that's living with a bipolar disorder or a schizophrenic disorder. Like for me, addiction is a human experience, not a human identity. Because behind the so-called addict, behind the so-called alcoholic, is a human being that experience a significant amount of trauma, emotional distress, and toxic chronic stress, and looking for a sense of relief from that distress. And we live in a culture and a society that conditions us to reach for something outside of ourselves when we're dealing with any type of pain, whether it's the physical pain or emotional pain. As a kid growing up, if I had a toothache or a headache, I was conditioned to reach for aspirin, Tylenol, and what have you. And I used a physical painkiller such as Oxycontin, Vicodin, Percocets, and heroin to deal with an emotional pain. And it worked for a while, like I said. It really helped me to deal with my feelings of feeling less than, the anxiety, the depression, the intense sadness that I experienced, the sense of the hole that I felt inside of myself, that I felt with things outside of myself. And then it became a problem. I became dependent on that. Then I became addicted to that whole process. But it was just very powerful for me to see that. And from that lived experience, I'm here now helping other people that's going through mental health challenges, addictive states challenges, and providing that peer-to-peer support, which is very valuable because I truly do believe that connection, human connection, is the cure for feelings of isolation, loneliness, depression, and different other types of emotional distresses that we experience in our lives. So as a recovery sports specialist as well too, I sit with people, I connect with people, I share my lived experience when appropriate, let another human being know that they're not alone when they're feeling anxious, when they're feeling depressed, when they're feeling intense sadness, when they are activated or stimulated or triggered from PTSD. I know how to sit with them and really create a safe space for people to heal. And one of the things I want to know about trauma is not what happened to you. What happens inside of you. So, the way we see ourselves, the world, and the people in it shifts when we become traumatized or we go through a traumatic event. So having that support that I provide and other clinicians and therapists and the great staff we have at Intercommunity Healthcare. If anyone have any struggles, challenges, they're more than welcome to reach out to me. I can be reached at area code 860-569-5900, extension 202. Even if you don't live in the greater Hartford area, I'm from Middletown, and I can connect you to different resources like Gilead, awesome services they offer there. We have the connections here in Middletown. We have Rushford. We have River Valley Services, CVH. So many different resources available for people that's going in any type of emotional distresses or addictive states. But I just want people to know that they're not alone, and they're definitely not their diagnosis. They're much more than that. And it's just so important that we know that and normalize our human experiences.
That is wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And I just want to tell everyone that all of the things that Kelvin mentioned, we will have as resources listed under this video, and you can share it. We'll make this link available on our YouTube channel, so you can share this dance and dialogue with any of your friends who aren't able to be here. And all of those resources we will list.
And I would love just to give the opportunity just for 1 minute, just to have an exercise to center ourselves, because sound healing, meditation, all these different mind-body practices, when I'm feeling anxious, when I'm feeling overwhelmed, when I'm feeling stressed out, just the sounds from this Himalayan singing bowl, it helps me to calm my minds, to relax my body, and to truly nourish my soul. And the meditative sounds produced from Himalayan singing bowls or the gongs or the ocean drum, it promotes healing from chronic stress, muscle tension, physical pain that we may feel in our bodies, feelings of anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress, any sleep issues, and different other stress-related chronic health conditions. So at this moment, I invite you to either close your eyes or bring a soft gaze to the floor. Whatever feels most comfortable and safe for you, I invite you to do so at this moment. As we take this time to check in with ourselves, see what emotions that may be coming up within our bodies, or any sensations that may be feeling within our bodies, or anything else that's happening in our conscious mind, in our bodies. Let's take a 1 minute just to check in with ourselves. As we take this time to simply just be. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. That was amazing. I'm trying to be aware of our time, and part of our dance and dialogue is to see the work again. So we're going to go ahead and transition to that so everyone can see it one more time. I hope you can stay with us for the second viewing, and we will also answer just a couple more questions that came through the chat right at the end. So panelists, we're going to turn off our videos and mute ourselves. We're now going to hear from theologian in residence, Morley Van Ypres.
I want to thank Calvin and Reverend Larissa for sharing. Really appreciated listening to your stories and listening to the work that you're doing. And I'm so grateful for these opportunities to be able to do these programs, to be able to watch the pieces. For me, watching this piece tonight was a totally different experience. I found myself only watching Ricky dancing, and I've never done that before. And I saw it in a different way. And I've seen this piece so many different times. So it wasn't that I was only watching Ricky. I was just watching it from a first person perspective instead of maybe the whole composition of it, or sometimes I've paid attention to the other dancers, but to be able to enter into the single story and all the things that were going around, it was just a very different experience. The other thing I wanted to say was that someone mentioned in the chat about the chair and about how there's so much symbolism for what we've been going through with COVID. And this fall, when I walked into the studio and they were rehearsing, it was the first time I had seen it with the chair. And I thought that is so appropriate right now, because we are all just sitting by ourselves in a chair. And it was just so perfect and so right. But one of the things that both Kelvin and Larissa said, you're talking about your whole self. You were talking about the body and living in the wholeness of our existence and of our experiences. And that was something that we had all dove into as we were working on this piece, and we were connecting it with scripture. So we had started to connect it with the Psalms, and Psalm 42, specifically this Psalm. And we we're talking about the word soul, and the word soul really is more than just this disembodied self. It's this whole self, including our body. And I just wanted to bring that. I loved everything that you all were talking about and how connected it is. And we were talking about being revealed, what this might reveal about ourselves and our being created in the image of God. And I think God came down in a body because we are whole and embody, and our experience here is so much a part of it. So anyway, and being able to watch it in dance, I think that is so important, because it's the dancing that, I mean, other things, the sound, all that stuff connects it, but watching it in dance. And I do think it's great that the facial expressions aren't there, because now we're not just watching the dancers' facial expressions, we're watching their whole bodily expression. So
yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that's what we've sort of discovered, is that part of our job at Ekklesia, we feel like is revealing, seeing the scripture sort of revealed in our bodies, and new discoveries as we're dancing through these topics and using scripture as well. And that was such a great discovery, Morley, when we just realized that the Hebrew word for soul was like nephesh, which is your throat or your guts, or like, it's always naming a body part. It's not this disembodied language that we have nowadays, where we separate our mind and our body and spirit, but it is all one in scripture. And that's really, I think, that in healing, we need to see it all connected and in as one. And Calvin, I think you touched a lot on that tonight. And that exercise was also just something that we could experiment with and see how that really connects, as we're, to our souls. So thank you so much. And thank you, everyone. I'm going to conclude here. Thank you for sticking with us. Well, we went a little bit over our usual time. And so I just want to say thank you to our panelist speakers, and thank you to Chris Bell, who did the lighting for this work, and Anna Munifo for her videography and her technical assistance. And we are going to be sending you a survey. If you would please fill that out for us. We really would love your feedback. We want to keep doing free dance and dialogues for the rest of this season and for next season. And we would love your support if you're able to make a contribution towards dance and dialogues. We'll have the link to our website in our survey that we send you in an email. So thank you again. We love you. We thank you so much for being a part of our community. Join us again next month. We're going to be talking about eco-justice and climate change and having some speakers on that topic from February actually through May. We'll be touching on, we're going to be covering it for a bit of time. So thank you so much.